Theodore was moving Barrington Barge. He loves pulling the flat-bottomed friendly barges to and from each shore. But more importantly, pulling barges helped Theodore prepare for getting his V word. So when Theodore became a V, he would be allowed to leave the harbor and go off across the ocean, pulling ships all around the world. Theodore was certainly getting to be a very good barge puller. Well, on that day they were passing the sandy beach. Theodore thought there was something strange about that beach, but he wasn't sure just what it was. Now, Theodore's favorite place in the whole harbor is the great ocean tug and salvage dock. It was the perfect place to be with his friends and dream of the adventures to come tomorrow. Emily was at the dock when Theodore arrived. "Emily, I've been pulling a barge," announced Theodore. Theodore knew Emily would be interested in how his job went. Emily often helped Theodore prepare for getting his own special V word by showing him the things he needed to know. But this time, Emily just said, "Oh, hi, Theodore," with a very sad look on her face. "Emily," said Theodore, "are you sad?" "The children aren't coming to play on the beach anymore," replied Emily, "and I miss them." Theodore thought there was something strange about the sandy beach, and now he knew what it was. There were no children. The Tugs loved the children who swam in the water and built sand castles. Why aren't the children coming around anymore? Theodore wondered. "It's a mystery," said Emily. "A mystery," said Hank. "I'm really good at mysteries." Hank came bobbing towards them. He had just finished pushing a garbage barge. "Why are you making that funny noise?" asked Emily. "Whoa!" shouted Hank. Before he could say anything, Hank began moving all over the place. "Whoa! He's out of control!" cried Emily. "Hank, turn off your engine." Hank managed to turn his engine off, and he finally stopped. Emily went over to have a look. She said. Theodore floated over, too. Sure enough, Hank's propeller was all tangled up in a piece of rope, some gunky newspapers, some seaweed, all kinds of garbage. "Now, where do you think all that came from?" asked Hank. "Well, that makes two mysteries," said Theodore. "What's the other mystery?" Hank wanted to know. Emily explained about the children not coming around anymore. "Oh, I know the answer to that," said Hank. "It's pollution." "Oh, pollution," said Theodore. Just then Photic appeared. "I know what pollution is," he said. "It's things that make a big noise and a big smell and a big mess." Suddenly the Tugs heard a loud buzzing sound. It was like a swarm of angry bees. It was George. He roared up very fast and very close to the Tugs and buzzed the dock, the way he sometimes did to announce his arrival. Well, it frightened that poor dock, whose name was Donald. The Tugs all coughed in the cloud of smelly smoke that snorted from George's stack. "What a big noise," said Photic. "And smell," said Hank. "And mess," added Theodore. "That's what pollution is," said Emily. "So it's George who's making pollution." The following day, Theodore was pulling Barrington Barge back to his dock. When they got to the sandy beach, Theodore slowed down. There sure is a lot of garbage on the beach, he thought to himself. He wondered, is that pollution too? Suddenly, Theodore heard a very loud noise. It was coming from Photic's radio. "Photic," called Theodore, "you're making a big noise. Now that's pollution." "Well," replied Photic, "you're leaking oil in the water." Theodore looked around behind him. Sure enough, there was a long trail of oil leaking from his engine. "See, you're making pollution," said Photic. Right about then, our friend Hank bobbed past, and Photic noticed he was missing his two front bumpers. "What happened to your bumpers, Hank?" he asked. They fell off. They were kind of crumbly, just garbage, really. So I tossed them in the cove. Theodore and Foduck both stared at Hank. Now, it was Hank who was the biggest pollution maker of them all. The sun was beginning to set over the waters of the Big Harbour. The big, noisy harbor. Theodore and Foduck's horns filled the air with loud toots. Oil is worse than noise, said Foduck. No, declared Theodore. Noise is worse than oil. Well, replied Foduck, broken bumpers thrown away on the shore are worse than everything. George and Emily were returning from moving a giant oil tanker. George vroomed his powerful twin engines. He began to go faster and faster, racing towards the dock. And then he buzzed poor Donald the dock again. You don't need to buzz the dock and kick up all that smoke, said Emily. You're just showing off. What do you mean, me? Replied George. You always leave your engine on even when you're not working. Well, that makes smoke, too. Well, all the tugs began to toot and talk at once, and the loudest of them all were George and Emily. I mean, you could hear them clear across the harbor. Of course, the dispatcher heard them, too. You tugs are disturbing the whole harbor, he said sternly. Especially George and Emily, and you two should know better. Then the dispatcher told George and Emily that if they couldn't get along, he would have to cancel their next trips on the ocean. There are other tugs, he said, who could go out on the ocean. Like Theodore. He's been doing a lot of good barge pulling lately. Now, please, be quiet and go to sleep. And with that, the tugs turned slowly back to their places. All except Theodore. He couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Did the dispatcher really say he might be able to go out on the ocean? Oh, that had been Theodore's dream ever since he was old enough to float. And it would mean he would receive his very own V-word, like the other ocean tugs. That night, the tugs couldn't sleep. They were all thinking about what the dispatcher had said. Emily was angry with George for making all the pollution and didn't want to work with him anymore. George was very worried what the dispatcher would take away his V. Then I'd just beat George to nothing, he thought to himself, said. Theodore was thinking too. He was thinking about what the dispatcher had said and about his own leaking oil. And Hank's bumpers. And Emily's smoke, and George's buzzing, and Foduck's radio. Suddenly, Theodore had the answer. He knew how the tugs could all be friends again. Guess what, he shouted. The dispatcher told us to be quiet, said Foduck. So Theodore didn't say anything, but he began to think some more. Should he help his friends, or be a V-Tug? Help his friends, or be a V? The next day, when he'd finished his work, Theodore returned home to the Great Ocean Tug and Salvage Company. The other tugs had long, long faces just like him. That's because they were still quarreling about who was making all the pollution. Uh-oh, said Hank. It was George. Hank knew they were all about to get buzzed again. Donald Dock was especially worried. He was ready for the worst. But George was worrying so much about not being a V anymore, he forgot to buzz Donald. Theodore didn't even notice. He was trying to make a very big decision. You see, he could make everyone friends again, but then he would miss his chance to take George and Emily's place as a V-Tug. And he kept thinking to himself, what good would it be going away to the ocean if I didn't have my friends to come home to? Theodore swallowed hard, and then he said, you know what? The other tugs looked at Theodore. George buzzes the dock, and that makes smoke. Emily leaves her engine on when she's not working, and that makes smoke too. Theodore plays his radio too loud. Hank throws his bumpers in the water, and I leak oil. So, said George. Well, that means we're all making pollution, said Theodore. Not just you. Theodore thought about the harbor. I think pollution comes from lots of places, he said. There's smoke from the factory and oil from the refinery and garbage from the city. And there was lots of garbage on the sandy beach, too. It's everywhere, said Hank. Well, when they heard that, the Tugs were even more upset. With so much pollution, what could any of them do about it? Emily turned to George. You didn't buzz Donald Duck this time, she said. That means you don't really have to. Well, maybe, mumbled George. Maybe we could all stop making pollution, said Theodore. And all start cleaning up the harbor, added Theodore. We could even have a harbor cleanup contest. I have a better idea, said Hank. We could have a great harbor cleanup contest. But George didn't seem so sure about Hank's idea. If we have a contest, said Emily, it means that George is already ahead. He's already stopped buzzing the dock and making all that smoke. Well, now George was smiling. You know, he said, I think this contest is a pretty good idea. The Tugs all talked at once, discussing things they could do to make the harbor cleaner in the Great Harbor Cleanup Contest. It was then and there that Theodore knew he had made the right decision. For once more, the Tugs were all friends again. And once again, the great ocean tug and salvage dock was his favorite place in the whole harbor. His place to be with his very best friends. Theodore, he's a tugboat